She woke up before the sun. The first light had not yet touched the small village at the foot of the mountain, but she was already on her feet. The air was cold and crisp, carrying the scent of damp soil and wildflowers that grew along the narrow path near her home. Her room was tiny, barely more than a corner in her family's old wooden house, but it was hers. She took a deep breath and tried to shake off the tiredness that clung to her body. Another long day awaited, another day of hard work and worry, just like yesterday and the day before that. Her life had never been easy. Her family had very little, just enough to survive, and sometimes not even that. Her parents worked from dawn to dusk, doing labor that barely paid for a simple meal. She had younger siblings who needed clothes, shoes, and food. Some days she felt like the weight of the entire world rested on her small shoulders. But she never complained. Complaining never helped, and she had learned a long time ago that life only rewarded action, not words. She quickly washed her face with cold water from the small clay pot in the corner of her room. The water was chilly, almost freezing, but she welcomed it. It made her feel alive, sharp, ready to face the day. She dressed in her simple clothes, faded from many washes but clean, and stepped outside. The village was quiet except for the soft crowing of roosters and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. Mist clung to the lower parts of the mountain, giving the village a mysterious, almost magical feel. She grabbed a basket and started toward the fields. Today she would gather vegetables and herbs to sell in the small market at the village center. It was not much, but every coin counted. Every small effort mattered. As she walked, she looked at the mountain looming above, its rocky peaks hidden by clouds. She had always been drawn to it, even though it frightened her sometimes. It seemed both beautiful and dangerous, wild and untouchable, but today she had no time to think about beauty. She had work to do, and she moved quickly, almost running, careful not to trip over the stones and roots that littered the path. Along the way, she greeted neighbors she passed. There was the old man who sold milk from his few cows, nodding at her with a tired smile. There was the woman carrying bundles of firewood, struggling under their weight, waving a hand in greeting. Everyone in the village knew her as the girl who always helped, who always smiled, who never refused a hand to those in need. She took pride in that reputation, not because she wanted recognition, but because she believed that kindness, even small, could make life a little lighter for everyone. She reached the fields at the edge of the village. The sun was still rising, but the first rays had begun to touch the tips of the leaves. The dew glistened like tiny diamonds, and the air smelled fresh, earthy, alive. She bent down, working carefully to pick the vegetables that were ready, her hands moving quickly and skillfully. She thought about her family, about how much she wanted to make their lives easier, even if only a little. She thought about her younger brother, who was always sick, and her little sister who loved to read stories even though they had almost no books. She thought about her parents who had given everything for her, who had never let her feel like she was alone, even when they had so little themselves. The hours passed quickly. She moved from one part of the field to another, her basket slowly filling. Sweat formed on her brow, her hands ached, and her legs were stiff, but she didn't stop. She had learned early that work, no matter how hard, brought its own reward. Every vegetable she picked, every coin she earned was a step toward a better life. A life where her family would not have to struggle every day. By midday, the basket was full. She wiped her forehead with the edge of her sleeve and looked at the pile of vegetables with satisfaction. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was something. It was proof that her efforts mattered, that she could make a difference even if it was just for a few people she loved dearly. As she walked back toward the village, she decided to take a slightly longer route. She liked to walk along the narrow paths that wound around the mountain's base. The view was beautiful and the air was cooler there. She could see the tops of the distant peaks catching the sunlight, and she could hear the faint sound of water flowing somewhere unseen, hidden behind the rocks and trees. It reminded her that the world was bigger than her worries, bigger than her struggles, bigger than the village itself. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice the sudden change in the air. A chill ran down her spine, not from the cold but from an uneasy feeling she couldn't explain. She slowed her steps, looking around carefully. The path was empty, the trees quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing. It was strange, but she told herself it was nothing. She had walked this path many times and knew it well. There was nothing to fear. Then she saw him. At first, she thought he was a traveler resting, perhaps someone who had gotten lost on the mountain. but as she got closer, she realized something was wrong. He was lying on the ground, twisted awkwardly, and his clothes were torn and stained with blood. His face was pale, and his chest rose and fell weakly. Her heart skipped a beat. She had never seen anyone in such a state before. Fear and concern collided inside her, but she knew she had to act. She dropped her basket and ran to him. Her hands trembled as she checked for a pulse, grateful when she found a faint but steady heartbeat. His breathing was shallow and his lips were blue. Panic rose, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had learned a few things from her mother about tending to injuries, and she knew she had to act fast. She tore strips from her own clothing to make bandages, pressed them gently against the wounds, and tried to keep him warm with a shawl she carried. She whispered words of encouragement, telling him to hold on, that help would come. She had no idea who he was or why he was here, but she didn't care. In that moment, all that mattered was saving a life. The minutes stretched like hours. She carried him to a nearby rock where he could rest, carefully adjusting his position to make him more comfortable. Sweat ran down her face and her hands were raw from the effort, but she refused to give up. She couldn't, she would not. Finally, she spotted a familiar figure in the distance. One of the villagers, seeing her struggle, had come to help. Together, they managed to carry him back toward the village, each step careful, each movement cautious. When they reached the small clinic at the village center, a few other villagers gathered around, shocked to see the state he was in. The local healer took over, guiding her to sit down and rest. She sank to the ground, exhausted, her body aching in every part, but her heart was light. She had done what she could. She had acted without hesitation, without thinking of herself. That was who she was. That was what she believed in. As she watched the healer work on him, she noticed something about the man that she couldn't quite place. There was a calmness to him, a quiet dignity even in his weakened state. She didn't know who he was, but something told her he was not an ordinary man, yet she didn't have time to think about it. There were more tasks to do, more things to manage, and the day was far from over. The sun climbed higher, and the village slowly came alive with its usual sounds. Children playing, vendors calling out their goods, the distant hammering from the blacksmith. But for her, time seemed to stand still. Her mind replayed the morning over and over, the mountain, the path, the man lying there helpless. She knew this moment would stay with her forever, a memory she would carry like a scar or a badge, marking the day she faced fear and chose courage instead. She didn't know then that this act, simple and human as it was, would change everything. She didn't know that the man she had helped, the stranger she had saved with her own 2 hands, was someone whose life touched thousands, someone whose world she would soon step into. For now, all she knew was that she had done the right thing, and that was enough. As evening approached, she returned to her home, weary but fulfilled. She prepared a simple meal for her family, laughing softly as her younger siblings told their little stories, oblivious to the dramatic events of the day. Her parents smiled at her quietly, proud of her even though they didn't fully understand the extent of what she had done. And as night fell over the village, she lay down staring at the ceiling of her small room, thinking of the mountain, the injured man, and the strange feeling in her chest that something significant had just begun. She closed her eyes, exhausted yet strangely alive. The world was unpredictable, harsh, and beautiful all at once. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She had faced it with courage, and nothing could take that away. Little did she know, her simple act of kindness that day at the foot of the mountain was the first step toward a life she had never dreamed of, a life that would change not only her own world but the world around her forever. The next morning, the girl woke up to the sound of birds singing outside her window. The mountain was still partly hidden in mist, but the sky was brighter now, painted in soft shades of pink and gold. Her body ached in places she hadn't even realized yesterday, and she felt the soreness from carrying the injured man down the mountain. Yet despite the exhaustion, there was a quiet energy inside her, a sense that something unusual had begun, something that would not leave her life unchanged. She hurried through her morning routine, fetching water and preparing breakfast for her family. Her younger siblings were already awake, chattering and laughing as they ate. She smiled at them, ruffling their hair, hiding the fatigue she felt. She had learned early in life that her own tiredness did not matter. What mattered was the comfort and safety of her family. Her parents watched her quietly, a mixture of pride and concern in their eyes. They had noticed how much she had been working, how often she pushed herself to the limits, but they said nothing. Words were not necessary. They understood her courage and her heart. After breakfast, she decided to visit the small clinic in the village. She had heard that the injured man from yesterday had been brought there. She did not know who he was or what his story might be, but curiosity tugged at her. More than that, she felt responsible. She had helped him, and she wanted to make sure he was okay. The path to the clinic wound through narrow streets and open fields, the morning sun warming her face. Along the way, villagers greeted her warmly, some whispering and pointing toward the clinic. She smiled politely, trying to appear unconcerned, but she felt a flutter of nervousness. She wondered what state he would be in, and whether she had done enough to help him survive. When she reached the clinic, the healer was already there, attending to the man. He was sitting on a cot, looking tired but stronger than the previous day. His wounds were bandaged neatly, and the bruises on his face were less severe, though still noticeable. When he saw her enter, his eyes widened slightly, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. "Thank you," he said, his voice weak but sincere. "I don't know what would have happened without you." She felt her cheeks warm. "It was nothing," she replied softly. "Anyone would have helped." He shook his head. "No, not anyone. You risked yourself to save a stranger. That is not common." She looked down, unsure how to respond. She had never thought of her actions as brave. She had acted because it was necessary, because it was the right thing to do. Yet, hearing him say it made something stir inside her, a feeling she could not quite name, a sense that her small efforts mattered more than she had ever realized. The healer motioned for her to step aside. "He needs rest," he said kindly. Too much excitement could set him back. She nodded and took a seat nearby, her mind wandering. She studied the man carefully, noticing his features, the way he carried himself even in weakness. There was something in his eyes that told her he had lived a life very different from hers. His hands, though injured, were not rough like a laborer's. His clothes, though torn and dirtied in the fall, hinted at wealth. Yet there was no arrogance, no haughtiness. He seemed human, vulnerable, in need of the same care anyone might need. She spent the morning quietly observing him, occasionally bringing small cups of water or a soft cloth to dab at his fevered forehead. Though he slept much of the time, there were moments when he would wake, his eyes meeting hers with gratitude and curiosity. They did not speak much, but there was an unspoken connection, a silent understanding that had formed in the middle of fear and pain. Meanwhile, the village buzzed with quiet excitement. Word had spread quickly about the girl who had saved a stranger from the mountain. People whispered about her courage, about the danger she had faced. Some came to the clinic, curious to see the man, to witness the girl's bravery. She felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment. She did not seek recognition, but she could not ignore the admiration in their eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt that her efforts were noticed, that her actions were seen as meaningful. As the day passed, she learned small fragments about the man. The healer spoke quietly with her during a moment when he stepped outside. "He was found in a very dangerous part of the mountain," the healer explained. "It is lucky he survived. Many would not have." "You did well," she nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat. I did what anyone would do," the healer smiled. "Not everyone has the courage or the presence of mind to act like that. You are special in your own way." Those words stayed with her, echoing in her mind as she returned to her small duties in the village. She sold some vegetables at the market, helped neighbors carry heavy loads, and returned home to care for her family. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the man on the cot, to the strange feeling she had experienced yesterday, and to the faint sense that her life was about to change. Later that evening, she returned to the clinic, drawn by an invisible thread of curiosity and concern. The man was awake this time, sitting up slightly, his gaze steady on her as she entered. "You came back," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I wanted to see if you were okay," she replied simply. He nodded slowly. "I am, thanks to you." There was a pause, a moment of quiet that seemed to stretch endlessly. He studied her, as if trying to understand her, to read something deeper than her actions. "You are remarkable," he said softly. She shook her head, feeling her face warm again. "I'm just a girl from the village. I did what I had to do." "No," he insisted, his voice firmer now. There is something different about you, something that makes people want to trust you, to believe in you. You have a light in you that is rare." Her heart thumped in her chest. She had never heard such words directed at her, not in this way. They were humbling yet strange, stirring a mixture of pride, confusion, and curiosity. She wanted to ask him who he was, why he was on the mountain, but the words caught in her throat. Somehow it felt too early to ask. Days passed and she continued her routine, but the memory of the man lingered. Sometimes when she walked through the village or worked in the fields, she thought about the mountain, about the fall, about the look in his eyes when he had first regained consciousness. There was something about him that felt important, as if fate had placed him in her path for a reason she did not yet understand. The villagers continued to talk in whispers. Some speculated about the man, wondering who he was and why he had been so far up the mountain alone. Others praised the girl, sharing stories of her bravery with a sense of awe. She listened quietly, neither denying nor fully embracing the attention. She preferred the work of her hands, the simple rhythm of daily life, yet she could not ignore the subtle changes in the air, the way people looked at her now with admiration and curiosity. One afternoon, the man's strength began to return more visibly. He could sit up longer, move his arms more freely, and even walk a few steps with support. The girl helped him when he requested it, guiding him carefully, ensuring he did not stumble. Their conversations grew slightly longer, still quiet, still cautious. He asked her about her life, her family, her work, and she shared with him the details she rarely spoke of aloud. "I work every day to help my family," she told him one afternoon. "It's not easy, but we manage. We don't have much, but we have each other. That's enough for me." He nodded thoughtfully. "You are strong, not just in body, but in spirit. Most people would give up when life is hard. You keep going," she shrugged. "I don't think about giving up. I have no choice. Life doesn't wait for anyone." He looked at her in silence, his eyes reflecting something she could not read. Gratitude, yes, but also admiration and perhaps a growing sense of connection that neither of them yet fully understood. By the end of the week, he could move more confidently, though he still needed care and rest. The healer finally allowed him to sit outside in the sun for short periods, where the fresh air seemed to revive him. The girl joined him there, carrying water, fresh cloths, and simple food. They shared quiet moments, speaking softly, laughing occasionally at small, light-hearted jokes. In these moments, the girl felt a strange comfort, a sense of companionship she had never experienced before. And yet, there was a lingering mystery. She still did not know who he really was, why he had been on the mountain, or what his life outside the village looked like. She felt the pull of curiosity growing stronger each day, mixed with the simple joy of helping, of being needed, of seeing a life recover because of her own hands. Little did she know that this man, lying weak and vulnerable at the foot of the mountain, carried a world far larger than her village, a world filled with power, wealth, and influence. She did not know that in saving him, she had set into motion a chain of events that would soon reach far beyond her imagination, a chain that would touch her family, her village, and herself in ways she could never have dreamed. For now, she simply cared quietly and steadfastly, learning the delicate balance between hope and reality, strength and vulnerability, human connection and the mysteries of fate. And in those quiet moments, as the sun warmed their faces and the mountain loomed silently behind them, she could not yet know that her simple courage, her willingness to help a stranger, was about to change her life forever. Days turned into a week, and the man's recovery progressed steadily. He was no longer confined to the cot in the small clinic. With the healer's permission, he began spending more time outside, walking slowly along the paths of the village and sitting in the warm sunlight. The girl stayed nearby, helping him, guiding his steps and keeping watch to make sure he did not overexert himself. Their connection, quiet and unspoken, deepened each day. She found herself drawn to his presence. He was polite, patient, and careful not to burden her, but she could sense that he valued her attention and company. There was something gentle in the way he looked at her, a quiet appreciation that went beyond words. It was not the kind of attention that made her uncomfortable, but rather something comforting, like a silent acknowledgement of her courage and kindness. The villagers continued to watch closely. Many were curious, whispering among themselves about the stranger in their midst. Some tried to guess who he was, but no one seemed to know. They only knew he was different from anyone they had seen in their simple village. And they all agreed on one thing: without the girl, he might not have survived. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the mountain cast long shadows across the village, the girl helped him walk toward a quiet stream nearby. He needed to drink, and the fresh air seemed to lift his spirits. The path was narrow and uneven, and she stayed close, ready to catch him if he stumbled. "Thank you for helping me," he said, his voice softer than usual, almost hesitant. I don't know how I can ever repay you." She shook her head, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't need to repay me. I did what anyone would do." He looked at her, studying her face, and then smiled faintly. "Not everyone would do what you did. I've seen people in situations like mine, and most look the other way. You didn't hesitate. That matters, more than you might ever know." She felt her cheeks warm but said nothing. Words often failed her when she was spoken to in a way that made her feel both seen and valued. Instead, she focused on steadying his steps as they approached the stream. They reached the water and he bent down carefully, cupping his hands to drink. She watched him, noticing the way sunlight caught the water droplets as they fell from his hands, glinting like tiny stars. For a moment, the world felt suspended, quiet, still, peaceful. She felt a calmness she had rarely known, as if in this simple act of helping someone, life had paused to offer her a rare moment of clarity. "You've never asked my name," he said suddenly, looking up at her with a curious expression. She laughed softly, a little embarrassed. "I suppose I haven't. I don't think it matters much." "It matters to me," he insisted gently. "I want to know the person who saved my life. At least your name. I think it's only fair." She hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'm the girl from the village. That's all you need to know for now." He smiled, seemingly satisfied, though she sensed that he was also thoughtful, as if her words carried more meaning than she intended. They remained by the stream for a while longer, talking quietly, sharing small details about their lives. She told him about her family, about the struggles she faced, about the simple joys she found in her daily routine. He listened intently, never interrupting, never judging, only nodding and occasionally asking gentle questions. As the days passed, their conversations grew longer. He shared fragments of his own life, careful not to reveal too much. He spoke of travel, of cities she had only heard of in passing, of work that seemed complicated and distant. She listened with fascination, imagining a world far beyond the mountains, a world she had never known existed. It was thrilling and terrifying at the same time, and she felt a strange mix of emotions, curiosity, admiration, and a quiet longing for something she could not yet define. One morning, she found him sitting outside the clinic, gazing at the mountain. He looked thoughtful, almost melancholy. She approached quietly, carrying a small jug of water and a cloth to wipe his forehead. "You think a lot," she said softly, perching on the edge of the cot beside him. He turned to her, a faint smile on his lips. "I have a lot to think about. About what happened, about everything. You've made me see things differently, though I don't fully understand it yet." She looked at him, puzzled. "Me? How could I make any difference?" He reached out, lightly touching her hand. "Because you saved my life. You risked yourself for someone you didn't even know. That is rare. Most people think of themselves first. You didn't. You acted with a courage and kindness that I've almost forgotten exists." She felt her heart beat faster at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not in her village, not in her family, not anywhere. She had always believed that life was about surviving, about working hard, about enduring. She had never considered that her actions could mean more than just immediate results, that they could touch someone deeply, even change the course of another life. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine something more. She allowed herself to feel the quiet thrill of being appreciated, of being valued, of being recognized not just for her labor, but for her heart. It was a dangerous feeling, one she had tried to avoid for so long, but she could not deny it. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they walked through the village together. People greeted him with polite curiosity, some bowing slightly, others whispering among themselves. She noticed how different their behavior was toward him, how the air seemed to change when he was around. It was subtle, but she could feel it. The respect, the attention, the invisible weight he carried. And yet he did not act proud or distant. He moved with quiet humility, acknowledging everyone politely, never demanding anything, never showing superiority. She admired that about him. Despite his obvious distinction, he remained human, vulnerable, approachable. It made her feel both comforted and intrigued. Who was this man, really? Why had fate placed him on that mountain path in that moment in front of her? She didn't know, and she felt a growing curiosity mixed with caution. One evening, as they walked near the edge of the village, he paused and looked up at the mountain. The last rays of sunlight painted the peaks in gold and crimson. He sighed, a sound of relief mixed with lingering tension. "You saved me at a time when I needed it most," he said quietly. "I can't imagine what might have happened if you weren't there." She looked at him, meeting his gaze. "I was just doing what I thought was right. Anyone who saw someone in need would have done the same." He shook his head gently. "No, not everyone. Most people hesitate. Most people turn away. You didn't. That makes all the difference. It has made a difference in my life, and I hope one day you understand how much." She felt a lump in her throat. Words were difficult, and she struggled to find a proper response. Instead, she simply nodded, allowing the silence to speak for her. Sometimes silence carried more weight than words, more honesty, more understanding. The days that followed were filled with small, quiet moments that built the foundation of trust and connection. She brought him food, helped him with small chores, and accompanied him on gentle walks. They laughed quietly at little mistakes, shared stories from their past, and slowly learned to read each other's expressions, to anticipate needs without speaking. The bond between them was subtle, almost invisible, but undeniably growing. She began to notice other changes too. He seemed genuinely interested in her life, asking questions about her family, her daily routines, her hopes, and even her fears. He listened with patience, offering advice sparingly, more often simply offering understanding and presence. She had never experienced such attention, such careful regard. It was comforting, reassuring, and strange all at once. One afternoon, she helped him sit under a large tree near the stream. The leaves rustled gently in the breeze, casting dancing shadows on the ground. She handed him a cup of water, and they both sat in silence for a while, listening to the sound of flowing water and the distant hum of village life. "You have a gift," he said softly, breaking the quiet. She looked at him curiously. "A gift?" "Yes," he replied. "The gift of seeing what matters, of caring without expecting anything in return. That is rare, and it changes everything." She blushed, unsure how to respond. She had never thought of herself as special, never imagined that her simple actions could carry such meaning, and yet hearing him say it made something inside her swell, a quiet pride, a recognition that she had the power to affect lives, to make a difference, even if she had always believed her life was small and insignificant. As the sun began to dip behind the mountain, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they slowly walked back toward the village. She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet contentment. The mountain, the fall, the rescue, it all felt like the beginning of something larger, something she could not yet see or understand. And she was ready to face whatever came next, quietly confident that courage, kindness, and heart could shape a future she had never dared to imagine. Days passed, and life in the village slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The girl continued with her daily work, carrying water, tending to her small garden, helping her family, and occasionally selling vegetables at the market. Yet she could not shake the quiet anticipation that lingered inside her. Every time she walked past the small clinic, she wondered how the man was doing, what thoughts were running through his mind, and whether he would ever speak more of himself. One morning, she arrived at the clinic to find him sitting outside, gazing at the horizon where the mountain met the sky. The sunlight painted his face in a warm glow, highlighting the faint lines of fatigue that still lingered from his accident. He looked more confident than before, walking without assistance for short distances and speaking with a calm clarity that suggested he was regaining his strength. "You seem better today," she said softly as she approached him, carrying a small jug of water and a cloth. He smiled faintly, glancing at her. "Yes, thanks to you. I feel stronger, more present. Your care has done more than you can imagine." She shook her head, embarrassed. "It's nothing, really." "No," he insisted, his gaze steady. "It is everything. Without you, I would not be here. And I want you to know that I am grateful, in ways I cannot fully express." She looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. Words always seemed inadequate in the face of his sincerity. She had acted out of instinct, out of a sense of duty and compassion, never imagining that her small actions could hold such weight. As the morning passed, more villagers began to notice the changes in the man. He moved with purpose, spoke with quiet authority, yet never demanded attention or privilege. His presence alone commanded respect even without his words. The girl observed the way people shifted slightly when he approached, the subtle nods and greetings, the hints of curiosity and admiration. It was clear to her that he was not like anyone she had ever met in the village. Later that afternoon, a few of the villagers whispered to her that someone from outside the village had arrived, asking questions about the man. She didn't pay much attention at first, but a small seed of curiosity began to grow. Who was he? Why had people from far away started noticing him? It wasn't long before she would find out. One evening, as she was preparing dinner for her family, a well-dressed assistant arrived at her home. The girl froze as the person introduced themselves, explaining that the man she had helped was no ordinary traveler. He was in fact a billionaire who owned vast businesses and properties across the country. Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at the assistant, trying to understand the meaning of those words. Billionaire, a person of such wealth and influence, and she had spent days caring for him, thinking of him only as a man in need. He asked us to find you, the assistant continued. He wants to personally thank you for what you did. Without your courage and kindness, he would not have survived. The girl felt a mix of shock, disbelief, and a strange sense of pride. She had always believed that her life was small, that her actions mattered little in the grand scheme of the world. And yet here was proof that even the simplest, most human acts could have consequences far beyond imagination. The next day she returned to the clinic, her heart racing with anticipation. The man was waiting for her, sitting in the sunlight looking more composed and confident than ever. When he saw her, a smile spread across his face, warm and genuine. You came, he said softly, his voice filled with relief. I had to, she replied simply, though her hands trembled slightly. I needed to see you. He nodded, his gaze steady. I wanted you to know the truth. I am not just a man traveling through the mountains. I have responsibilities, a life far larger than this village. And yet, despite all of that, you saw me as a person in need, not as someone powerful or wealthy. That is rare. That is why I am here, to express my gratitude and to offer you something, though I know words can never fully repay what you did. The girl listened quietly, overwhelmed by the revelation. She had never imagined that her simple act of helping a stranger could lead to this moment. She had acted out of instinct, out of compassion, and now she faced a world she had never known existed. He continued, carefully choosing his words. I want to offer you opportunities not just for yourself but for your family. Education, support, a chance to live a life without constant struggle. I have resources, connections, and influence that can open doors you never thought possible. I want to help you, to make sure that your courage and kindness are rewarded, and that your family benefits from what you have done. Tears welled up in her eyes, a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She had never imagined such possibilities. Her life had always been defined by struggle, by survival, by small victories in a world that seemed indifferent to her efforts. And now here was someone offering her a chance to step into a life she had never dared to dream of. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice shaking. Then don't say anything, he replied gently. Actions matter more than words. Your actions saved my life. I want my actions to help you in return. Over the next few days, he introduced her to people who could provide guidance and support. He arranged for tutors to help her continue her education, offered resources to improve her family's living conditions, and even suggested small business opportunities she could manage. It was overwhelming, a flood of possibilities she had never imagined. Through it all, he remained patient, never pushing, never expecting anything beyond her comfort. He seemed genuinely interested in her well-being, in her growth, in her ability to navigate this new reality without losing the values and courage that had defined her from the start. One afternoon, as they walked together near the stream, he spoke again, his tone softer, more personal. I know this must be a lot to take in. Your world and mine are so different. I cannot ask you to understand it all at once, but I hope you know that nothing I offer can change the fact that you are remarkable, that your heart is pure, and that your courage has touched my life in ways I cannot fully explain. She looked at him, feeling a mix of awe and humility. I never expected any of this. I only did what felt right. I never thought it would lead to anything more. That is exactly why it mattered so much, he said, smiling gently. Because you acted without expectation. Because your kindness was genuine. That is why I am here. To honor that and to ensure that your life can be fuller, richer and safer. Not because of me, but because of what you already showed exists inside you. Her heart swelled with emotion. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that life could be more than constant struggle. She imagined her younger siblings with opportunities she had never had, her parents living with less worry and more comfort, her own future filled with choices and freedom. It was a vision both exciting and daunting, but for the first time hope felt tangible. In the following days, the villagers began to notice subtle changes too. The man, still humble and approachable, helped improve conditions in the village quietly. He provided resources for the clinic, offered support for local farmers, and encouraged education for children. Yet he never overshadowed the girl, always making it clear that she was the one who had inspired him to act. Through it all, she remained herself, kind, humble, hardworking, and courageous. The attention, the gifts, the opportunities did not change her character. If anything, they amplified it, allowing her to act with greater purpose and confidence. She was no longer just a girl from the village. She was someone whose actions had opened doors, not only for herself but for the community around her. One evening, as they watched the sun set behind the mountain, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, he turned to her and said softly, "You have given me something I thought I had lost, a reminder that goodness exists, that courage matters, that one person can truly make a difference. I hope in some way I can give back to you what you have given me." She smiled, a quiet, serene smile. "You already have. By living, by recovering, by being here, that is enough." He nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Still, I want to do more. For you, for your family, for your future. You deserve every chance to live fully, to thrive, to be safe and happy. That is the least I can do." And in that moment, she realized that life had shifted irreversibly. What had begun as a simple act of compassion on the mountain had grown into something extraordinary. She had touched a life, and that life in turn was reaching back to touch hers. The possibilities were endless, the future uncertain but bright, and she felt ready to face it with courage, humility, and an open heart. Little did she know that the true impact of this connection would unfold even further in the days to come, revealing challenges, surprises, and opportunities that would test her resolve, expand her world, and ultimately transform her life in ways she had never imagined. But for now, she simply allowed herself to feel gratitude, hope, and a quiet sense of wonder at the strange and beautiful twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. Life began to change in ways the girl could hardly have imagined. After the revelation of the man's true identity, her days were filled with new opportunities and responsibilities. It was overwhelming at first, but she faced it all with the same quiet determination and courage that had defined her from the very beginning. Her family, too, began to see the difference. Their small home was gradually improved. Her younger siblings had books and shoes they had never owned before, and her parents no longer carried the constant worry in their eyes that had shadowed them for years. Despite all the gifts and support, the girl remained herself. She woke early, tended to her garden, helped her family, and sold vegetables at the market when she could. She did not allow the sudden change in fortune to make her arrogant or distant. If anything, it made her more aware of how fragile life could be, how easily it could change, and how important it was to stay grounded and kind. The man continued to spend time in the village, though he often had responsibilities that pulled him back to the cities where his businesses were based. Yet, he always returned to check on her, to offer guidance, and to quietly support her ambitions. He never demanded anything, never asked for recognition, but simply stood beside her as a mentor, a friend, and a reminder that courage and kindness were noticed and valued. One afternoon, as the girl walked along the edge of the village with him, she noticed a small group of children playing near the stream. Their laughter was bright and unrestrained, echoing off the mountainside. She paused to watch them, a smile spreading across her face. It reminded her of herself as a child, of the simplicity and joy she had once known before life's hardships had pressed down so heavily. "You seem happy," he said softly, falling into step beside her. She nodded, glancing at him. I am. I think I can finally see a future where happiness is possible. Not just for me, but for my family, for others in the village too. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. That is exactly what I hoped for you. You have worked so hard, lived through so much, and yet you've kept your heart open. That is rare. And that is why this opportunity exists, not because of me, but because of who you are. Her heart swelled. She had never considered that her simple acts of courage and kindness could have such far-reaching consequences. She had only ever wanted to survive, to help her family, to do what was right. And now, she found herself stepping into a life where her choices mattered in ways she had never imagined. In the weeks that followed, the girl began to learn more about the wider world. She met tutors who helped her continue her education, learning about subjects she had only heard of in passing: mathematics, history, languages, and even basic finance. She discovered a curiosity and intelligence within herself that had always been there but had never been nurtured. Each day she grew more confident, more aware of her own potential, and more determined to use her new knowledge to improve her life and the lives of those around her. The man encouraged her, never pushing too hard, always allowing her to find her own path. He would sit beside her while she studied, offering advice or answering questions when she asked, but he never treated her as inferior or dependent. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, with her strength and determination matched by his guidance and resources. One evening, as they walked through the village under the fading light of the sun, he stopped and looked at her with a serious expression. I want to show you something, he said. Something that will help you understand the possibilities that exist, the impact you can have, and the difference your life can make, not just here but beyond this village. He took her to a nearby property he had purchased quietly, intending to develop it into a small community center and learning space for the children and families of the village. The girl's eyes widened as she saw the land, imagining the gardens, classrooms, and spaces where people could gather, learn, and grow together. You did this? She asked, unable to hide her astonishment. I did, he said softly, but it is inspired by you. Your courage, your kindness, your willingness to help someone in need. It made me want to do more. This is for the village, for the future, and I want you to be a part of it, to help guide it, to use your heart and mind to shape something meaningful. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had never thought of herself as someone who could influence the world beyond her own small life. And now, here was an opportunity to do just that. She realized that courage and selflessness had a ripple effect, touching lives in ways she could never have predicted. Over the next few months, the girl became deeply involved in the project. She worked alongside builders, educators, and volunteers, helping to plan spaces where children could learn, where families could gather, and where the community could find support. She discovered leadership skills she had never known she possessed, the ability to inspire others, and the strength to make decisions that would affect many lives. All the while, the man remained by her side, quietly guiding and supporting, never overshadowing her contributions. They grew closer, their connection deepening, not just as mentor and student, but as friends who understood and valued each other. He admired her resilience, her courage, and her heart, while she respected his humility, wisdom, and unwavering kindness. One day, as they walked together through the nearly finished community space, the girl paused and looked around. Children played in the yard, laughter echoing through the air. Families gathered in small groups, talking and learning. The sense of hope and possibility was tangible, and she felt a deep satisfaction in her chest. I never imagined this could happen, she said softly. He smiled, watching her closely. Neither did I. And yet here we are. Your courage created a chain of events that has changed so many lives, including my own. You see, it is not just about wealth or influence. It is about the human heart, the choices we make, and the care we show for others. You have reminded me of that. She felt a quiet warmth in her chest, a sense of fulfillment she had never known. For so long, her life had been defined by struggle, by survival, by uncertainty, and now she could see the fruits of her efforts, not just in the material changes to her life, but in the growth, hope, and joy she had helped cultivate in others. The man turned to her, his expression serious, yet gentle. "I want you to know something. What you have done, who you are, and the impact you have made, none of this can be measured by money or status. It is measured by hearts, by lives changed, and by the legacy of kindness you leave behind. And that is far more valuable than anything else." Her eyes glistened with tears and she nodded, unable to speak. Words seemed inadequate to capture the depth of emotion she felt. She had never imagined that her life, so small and ordinary, could carry such meaning and influence. As time passed, the girl continued to grow, learning, helping, and inspiring. Her family's life improved, not only materially but emotionally, as they felt the relief of security and the joy of seeing their daughter's potential recognized. The village thrived, benefiting from the community space and the resources the man provided, yet the girl remained grounded, humble, and committed to her roots. She learned that true change comes not from wealth alone, but from courage, compassion, and the willingness to act when it matters most. Her simple act of rescuing a man on a mountain, done without expectation, had transformed her life, his life, and the lives of many others. She had stepped into a new world, yet had not lost the heart that had carried her through hardship and guided her toward kindness. One evening, as they watched the sun set behind the mountain, the man turned to her with a quiet smile. "You have shown me what really matters," he said softly. "You have reminded me that one person can make a difference, that courage and kindness can change the course of lives. Thank you for everything you have done, and for everything you continue to do." She looked at him, feeling a mix of gratitude, respect, and affection. "I didn't do it for recognition," she said quietly. "I just wanted to help. And now, seeing all of this, I feel happy. For the first time, I feel like maybe life can be something more than struggle." He nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "Life can be more, and it is because of you. Never forget that the power to change the world lies not in wealth or status, but in hearts like yours. That is what makes you remarkable." The girl smiled, a deep, serene smile. She had faced fear, acted with courage, and opened her heart without expectation. And in return, life had offered her a world she had never imagined, a world of opportunity, connection, and hope. Her life was no longer defined solely by struggle, but by the impact she had made, the people she had touched, and the future she was building for herself, her family, and her village. And as the sun dipped below the mountain, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, she knew that this was only the beginning. The act of kindness she had offered so simply had created ripples far beyond her understanding. Her life had been changed forever, and in that change she found courage, joy, and a sense of purpose that would guide her for years to come.